The galactic council chambers hummed with the low-frequency vibrations of 100 alien voices, a discordant symphony of clicks, growls, and synthesized translations. Ambassador Krellix of the Zority Dominion tapped his chitinous fingers against the obsidian table, mandibles twitching in irritation. "Another outpost gone," he hissed, holographic debris spinning above the central display. No survivors, no distress signals. Just silence. Across the chamber, the Krull Empire's envoy, Vorgit the Unflinching, bared his serrated teeth in what might have been amusement. Pirates, or the Sithari rebels. Hardly worth summoning the council. His voice was a graveled rumble, thick with disdain. "You're wrong." The voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. Counselor Lyra of the Luminar, her bioluminescent veins pulsing cobalt, gestured toward the star map. "These attacks follow a pattern. They're moving inward from the Orion arm." She paused, letting the implication hang. "Toward them," Vorgit snorted. "If you fear some unknown conqueror, then you've been breathing too much nitrogen. The only species out there are the humans, and they barely manage fusion drives before we stop paying attention." On Earth, beneath the frozen tundra of Antarctica, Admiral Elias Vance stood in the shadow of his creation. The UNS Titan loomed in its subterranean dock, a 5-kilometer monstrosity of blackened alloy and weaponized arrogance. Its hull drank in the light, a predator coiled in the dark. "They'll see us now," muttered Lieutenant Anya Petrov, her breath foggy in the cold. She adjusted her tactical visor, the display flickering with damage reports from the last simulation. "Assuming we don't tear ourselves apart first." Vance didn't answer. His reflection stretched across the Titan's prow, a gaunt silhouette against the ship's killing edges. 50 years. 50 years since the Krull had glassed Mars, since Earth had huddled behind its pathetic orbital defenses and prayed the aliens would grow bored. The scars still showed, in the hollows of Vance's cheeks, in the way Petrov's fingers twitched toward her sidearm at sudden noises. "We're not hiding anymore," Vance said at last. The bridge of the Titan was a cathedral of violence. Crewmen moved in hushed urgency, their faces lit by the glow of targeting arrays. At the helm, Commander Rajat Singh cracked his knuckles. Coordinates locked. Pluto's dark side. Krull listening post, small, but it'll send a message. Petrov frowned. "They'll know it was us." Vance settled into the command throne. Good. The jump toward reality opened. One moment. The Titan hung in the void. The next, it wrenched itself into existence above Pluto, its gravity drive screaming. The Krull outpost had no time to react. The Titan-S primary cannon, a spinal-mounted monstrosity fed by stolen Zen technology, fired once. A beam of distorted space-time ripped through the outpost, twisting metal into abstract art. On the bridge, silence. Then Singh let out a shaky laugh. "Well, that worked." Vance watched the debris scatter. Somewhere out there, the Krull were already scrambling, their arrogance crumbling to dread. Let them come. Let them see. The Krull Emperor's throne room reeked of charred flesh and molten metal. Vorgit the Undying, a title earned through cruelty, not truth, clutched the armrest of his obsidian throne as the holographic feed flickered before him. The outpost at Pluto was gone. Not defeated. Not merely destroyed. Erased. The footage showed twisted wreckage still glowing white-hot, the remains of his warriors reduced to atoms scattered across the void. "Impossible!" snarled High Warlord Draxus, his armored fists clenched. "No species in the Orion arm has such weapons. Not even the Xanth." Vorkita's claws dug into the throne. Yet the humans did this. The word tasted foul. Humans. A backwater race, barely worth the effort of crushing. He had ordered Mars burned to teach them their place, then forgotten them. A mistake. A tremor ran to the chamber as the fleet mobilization alerts blared. Draxus snarled. "We will gather the Black Fleet, wipe their wretched world from the stars." Vorkit said nothing. The humans had not simply struck back. They had done so with a weapon beyond Krull understanding. And that terrified him more than he would ever admit. Aboard the Titan, the air hummed with something sharper than victory. Petrov watched the tactical display, her fingers tracing the fresh crimson dots blooming at the system's edge. "They're mobilizing," she said. Not just patrols. Full battle groups. Singh whistled. Someone's upset. Vance didn't smile. Good. Let them come. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They had trained for this, drilled for it, but none of them had truly believed the Titan would ever be unleashed. Now, with the first blood spilled, the weight of what they were doing settled over them like a shroud. Petrov turned to Vance. We could still transmit terms. Offer them a chance to stand down. Vance's gaze didn't waver from the star map. They had their chance 50 years ago. The Galactic Council chambers were in chaos. Elira's luminescent veins flared violet as she slammed her palms against the table. You dismissed them, called them primitives. Now look what they've done. Krelix's mandibles twitched. A single skirmish does not make them a threat. The crawl will crush them within the cycle. Will they? The new voice cut through the noise like a blade. Ambassador Trek of the Zen Collective, his scale face unreadable, stepped forward. The Zenth rarely spoke in council. When they did, others listened. The Crawl outpost was annihilated by weaponry even we do not possess. You think this is a skirmish. He activated a holo display, a grainy, intercepted transmission. The Titan-S silhouette, black and jagged, filled the screen. This is a declaration of war. Not against the Crawl. Against all of us. Silence. Then, slowly, Krelix straightened. Then we unite. The Zordi fleets will join the Crawl. We will erase this insult from the galaxy. Elira's glow dimmed. She had seen the footage. The humans had not simply attacked. They had punished. And punishment, once begun, rarely stopped with a single blow. The Titan-S AI core pulsed like a living thing, its neural networks weaving strategies faster than any organic mind could comprehend. Vance stood before it, arms crossed. Projections? The AI's voice was calm, genderless, and utterly without mercy. Crawl Blackfleet will enter Sol within 18 hours. Estimated strength: 3 dreadnoughts, 47 cruisers, support vessels. Probability of victory: 98.3%. Petrov exhaled sharply. That's not a battle. That's a massacre. Vance's smile was thin. Yes. Singh leaned forward. And after? The Crawl won't be the only ones coming. Vance turned back to the star map, where fresh crimson clusters pulsed at the edges of known space. The Zorti, the Zenth, the others. Let them, he said softly, let them see what happens when humanity stops hiding. The Crawl fleet arrived in a storm of fire and arrogance. Draxus himself led the vanguard, his flagship Worldbreaker gliding ahead of the armada like a dagger unsheathed. Burn their colonies, he ordered. Leave nothing but ash. Then space ripped open ahead of them. The Titan emerged not as a ship, but as a silhouette of annihilation, its hull drinking in the starlight. For a single, frozen moment, the Crawl fleet hesitated. Then the Titan fired. The Worldbreaker S shields held for less than a second before the gravity cannon's beam struck. The dreadnought folded in on itself, metal screaming as it collapsed into a singularity no larger than a fist. Then it was gone. Across the Crawl fleet, panic erupted. Ships veered wildly. Their formations shattered before the battle had even begun. Draxus's last transmission was a roar of fury, cut short as the Titan-S secondary batteries lanced out, reducing his cruiser to molten slag. Aboard the Titan, Petrov watched the slaughter in silence. This wasn't war. This was vengeance. And it was only beginning. Vance leaned back in his command throne, eyes fixed on the dying Crawl fleet. Send a transmission. All frequencies. All languages. The message was simple. 11 words, repeated in every tongue the Titan-S databases held. Asterisk, we are coming. And the galaxy will remember its fear. The message burned across the galaxy like wildfire, igniting panic in every species that received it. The Zen Collective, pride of their warrior caste still stinging from the Titan-S threat, were the first to respond. Their armada emerged from warp at the edge of Sol, a swarm of sleek, predatory ships glistening with weaponry that had conquered 100 worlds. High Commander Zala stood on the bridge of his flagship, clawed the void, and watched the human homeworld glow like a blue ember in the distance. Pathetic, he hissed. his forked tongue tasting the stale recycled air. They have one ship. We will feast on their bones before their star sets. His second-in-command, Vexus, hesitated. The Crawl thought the same. Zalith ignored her. Aboard the Titan, alarm screamed as the Zent fleet registered on long-range scans. Singh wiped sweat from his brow, fingers dancing across his console. Well, that's a lot of angry lizards. Petrov's hands tightened around the armrest of her seat. We can't take them all. Not even the Titan is that strong. Vance didn't look up from the tactical display. No, but we don't have to. The AI core pulsed, its voice smooth and certain. Directive confirmed. Activating protocol, Ragnarok. Petrov's blood ran cold. She knew that name. They all did. The Zent fleet advanced, formations tight, weapons primed. Zalith bared his fangs. Open fire. Leave no. Space shuddered. Around the Titan, reality itself seemed to fracture as a dozen new signatures blinked into existence, each an exact copy of the monstrous battleship. Zalith's frigate sensors overloaded immediately, screaming in electronic agony. Impossible! Vexus shouted. They're scans, they're real. Zalith's scales went pale. The humans hadn't built one Titan. They'd built 13. The battle lasted 17 minutes. The Zen fought with the desperation of a species realizing, too late, that they had kicked a sleeping beast. Their plasma lances carved glowing wounds into the Titaness duplicates, only for the illusions to flicker and resolidify, unharmed. Gravity cannons tore through Zent hulls like paper, entire battle groups vanishing in flashes of distorted light. Aboard the real Titan, Vance watched the slaughter with hollow eyes. The AI's voice whispered in his ear. Zent flagship remains. Orders. Vance thought of Mars, of the billions who had died screaming under Crawl bombardment. End them. The Titaness primary cannon charged, its hum resonating through the ship's bones like the growl of a waking god. Zalith's final moments were filled with light. The beam struck the claw of the void amidships, shearing through decks, reactors, and the remnants of Zent pride in a single catastrophic instant. The explosion lit up the solar system brighter than Sol itself, a funeral pyre visible from every human colony. Silence fell across the galaxy. In the Galactic Council chambers, Alira watched the live feed with her bioluminescent veins gone dark. The humans hadn't just won. They had annihilated two of the most powerful militaries in known space, without losing a single ship of their own. Ambassador Krelix's mandibles clicked weakly. We must sue for peace. Tvek, the Zent ambassador, said nothing. His species had just lost an entire generation of warriors. There was nothing to say. Alira activated the emergency broadcast channel. Human Vessel Titan, this is a Galactic Council. We acknowledge your strength. Name your terms. Aboard the Titan, the crew held their breath. Vance leaned forward, his face gaunt in the console's glow. No more lies. No more treaties. From this moment, humanity answers to no one. He paused, letting the words sink in across 1,000 worlds. We are not your subjects. We are not your prey. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Petrov finally understood. This was never about revenge. It was about fear. And now, at last, the galaxy remembered how to tremble. The silence that followed humanity's victory was heavier than the void between stars. Across the galaxy, species who once barely acknowledged Earth's existence now watched its star with wary, calculating eyes. The Titan floated at the heart of Sol like a sleeping predator, its blackened hull still humming with residual energy from the battle. On the bridge, Petrov stared at the tactical display, now eerily empty of threats. They'll regroup, she murmured. The Council, the Zent remnants, they won't accept this. Singh snorted, spinning a stylus between his fingers. They don't have to accept it. They just have to obey it. Vance said nothing. His reflection in the viewport showed a face carved deeper with lines than any battle scar could account for. The war was won, the cost still uncounted. On the ruined homeworld of the Zent, High Matriarch Vexus knelt in the ashes of her ancestors' temple. The air stank of ionized metal and charred flesh. Around her, The few surviving warriors of Collective clutched their weapons with trembling claws. "They will come for us," hissed one, his once gleaming scales now dull with soot. "The humans will finish what they started." Vex's closed her inner eyelids, shutting out the devastation. "No." Her voice was a rasp, but it carried. "If they wanted us dead, we would be—" She lifted her head, tasting the bitter wind. This was never about extermination. A young warrior bared his fangs. "Then what?" Vexus exhaled slowly. "A lesson." The Galactic Council convened in secret, their chamber stripped of all recording devices. Elira's bioluminescence flickered erratically, her usually graceful movements sharp with tension. "We cannot fight them," she said, "but we cannot submit." Ambassador Krellix's mandibles clicked in agitation. "There is always another way." The Yulani Concord would burn before lifting a finger, interrupted Tvek. The Zenta's scales had lost their luster, his voice hollow. "You still do not understand. The humans did not defeat us with weapons. They defeated us with time." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Tvek continued. "While we squabbled, they prepared. While we ignored them, they learned." He looked at each ambassador in turn. "How many other species are we ignoring right now?" The silence that followed was colder than space. Aboard the Titan, Petrov found Vance in the observation deck, staring at the stars. "Orders came through from Earth," she said. "They want us to stand down. Begin diplomatic talks." Vance didn't turn. "Do they?" Petrov hesitated. "You knew this would happen." "Of course." Vance's breath fogged the reinforced glass. "Politicians love peace. Right up until the next war." Outside, the void glittered, indifferent. Petrov studied her captain, really studied him. The man who had avenged Mars, who had broken the galaxy's spine over his knee. There was no triumph in his eyes, only exhaustion. "What now?" she asked quietly. Vance finally turned. His smile was thin, humorless. "Now," he said, "we wait." In the dark between galaxies, something stirred. It had no name, no form that mortal minds could comprehend. But it had watched, and it had learned. The humans were interesting, but all interesting things must be asterisk-tested. The Titaness corridors hummed with an uneasy quiet, the kind that settled in the bones of a warship when the fighting was done, but the war wasn't. Petrov found Singh in engineering, elbow deep in the guts of gravity drive stabilizer, his usually cocky demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "You feel it too," she said, leaning against the bulkhead. Singh didn't look up. "Feel what?" "That we're being watched." His wrench hesitated for half a second before clanging against the housing. "Maybe we are." He wiped grease on his pants and finally met her eyes. "You ever wonder why the Zent didn't see us coming? Why the Crawl really left us alone after Mars?" Petrov's fingers twitched toward her sidearm out of habit. "What are you saying?" Singh tapped the ship's hull with his wrench. A dull, hollow echo. "I'm saying the Titan wasn't our first miracle. Just the first one we noticed." Vance stood in the AI core chamber, the pulsing blue light casting his face in jagged shadows. The machine's voice filled the space, smoother than any human tongue. "Query, why do you distrust your victory?" "Because I know what comes next," Vance said. He placed a hand against the core's housing, feeling the vibration of its thoughts through his palm. "They'll send diplomats first, then spies, then assassins." The AI's response was almost gentle. "And then—" Vance smiled without humor. "Then they'll learn why we built you." The core pulsed brighter, its light bleeding into the red spectrum for a single, alarming second before stabilizing. "Understood." On the edge of explored space, the stars went dark, not from absence, from consumption. Deep-range scanners aboard the Titan screamed to life, flooding the bridge with frantic alerts. Petra was the first to reach the console, her breath catching as the data resolved. "Something's coming." Her voice cracked. "Something big." Singh's jokes died in his throat when he saw the readings. "That's not a fleet." Vance arrived last, his footsteps measured. He studied the screen where entire light years of starfield winked out in a perfect sphere of advancing darkness. The pattern was unmistakable, hungry, methodical, and heading directly for Seoul. Recall all patrols, Vance said softly. Wake the sleeping giants. Petrov turned, her face pale. The other Titans? Vance's eyes reflected the dying stars on the screen. No, the things we built them to fight. The Galactic Council received the transmission in stunned silence. Alira's bioluminescence flickered erratically as she played it for the third time. Vance's haggard face filled the projection. His message brutally simple. Asterisk. You wanted to know why humanity hit its strength? Now you'll see. And when the dark comes, remember we tried to warn you. Asterisk. Krelix's mandibles quivered. This is a trick. Another human. Tvek slammed his scaled fist on the table, cracking the obsidian surface. Fool! Can't you see? We weren't their enemies. We were their warning. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's external feeds activated, showing the first real-time images of the approaching darkness. Something vast moved within it, shaping the void like clay. Alira whispered what they all suddenly understood. Oh, gods! They weren't preparing to conquer us. Asterisk, they were preparing to save us. Asterisk, aboard the Titan. Vance strapped into a command throne as the ship's full arsenal came online. The AI's voice rang through the ship, no longer calm, alive with something terrifyingly close to anticipation. All systems engaged. The old enemy approaches. Petrov gripped her console as the first distant tremors rocked the ship. You knew, she accused Vance. All this time you knew. Vance watched the view screen where the last offensive outpost flared and died at the edge of the expanding dark. Not knew, he corrected. Suspected. He activated the fleet-wide comm. This is Admiral Vance to all human vessels. Stand ready. The Titaness weapons charged with rising whine, their song building toward crescendo. Today, Vance said softly, we earn our fear. Outside, the darkness rippled and answered. The darkness didn't advance. It unfolded, reality itself shuddering as a thing at its core took shape. On the Titan's bridge, the view screen fizzed with static, struggling to resolve the impossible geometry of what approached. Petrov's hands hovered over her console, her breath shallow. It's not just consuming space, she whispered. It's rewriting it. Vance didn't flinch. AI. Status on the God Killers. The ship's voice answered, colder now, stripped of pretense. Asterisk, armed and ready, awaiting your command. Asterisk. Singh spun in his seat, his usual smirk replaced by something grim. You're telling me we've had planet crackers this whole time and now's when we use them? Vance's gaze never left the screen. They weren't for planets. The Galactic Council's emergency channel erupted in panic transmissions. Alira watched, her bioluminescence pulsing frantic violet, as the first human fleet emerged from hidden shipyards, vessels sleek and alien, their designs unlike anything in known space. Tvek exhaled sharply. Not warships, he realized. Containment vessels. Krelix's mandibles clicked uselessly. For what? The answer came not in words, but in light. At the edge of the dying starfield, the Titan fired. The God-Killer missile left no sound in the void, but every being in the solar system felt its passage, a psychic screech that rattled teeth and claws and exoskeletons alike. It struck the heart of the advancing dark. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then the darkness screamed. The entity recoiled, its edges fraying like burned paper, revealing glimpses of something vast and wounded beneath. Petrov's console lit up with frantic data. It's not a ship, she breathed. It's alive. Vance's fingers tightened around his armrests. Again. The entity struck back. Space twisted as it lashed out, a tendril of pure negation lancing toward the Titan. The ship's shields buckled instantly, entire decks vaporizing in the blink of an eye. Alarms wailed as atmosphere vented into the void. Singh fought to stabilize their spin, blood trickling from his nose from the psychic backlash. Okay, new plan? Vance spat red onto the deck. AI. Full burn toward the rift. Fire all remaining God-Killers on my mark. Petrov's head snapped up. That's suicide. Calculated sacrifice, The AI corrected. Asterisk probability of mission success. 38.2%. Asterisk. Vance bared his teeth in something too feral to be a smile. Good enough. The Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the crippled Titan accelerated toward the unraveling dark, its remaining weapons glowing white-hot with charge. Alira found herself whispering an old Luminar prayer. Tvek closed his inner eyelids. Krellix, for once, had nothing to say. Aboard the Titan, Singh gripped his console as the G-forces mounted. You know, for the record, this is the worst plan you've ever had. Vance didn't answer. The view screen showed only the hungry dark now, close enough to see the fractures in its core, a glimpse of something older than stars. Petrov reached across the shuddering deck, her fingers brushing Vance's bloody knuckles. Tell me this works. Vance met her gaze. One way, or another. The AI's voice cut through the chaos, calm and final. Asterisk mark. Asterisk. Vance closed his eyes. The universe flinched.